Hey everyone, it's Jamison Cable of the Land Between the Meadows, Kentucky History Podcast. I just want to say thank you for your support and listening to this episode. For all the updates on our podcast and YouTube channel, youtube.com/Kentucky History Channel, like and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at KY History Pod. If you're enjoying the podcast, give us a good rating and review on Apple Podcasts or the podcast platform that you're listening to. If you're looking for ways to support the podcast, an easy and simple way is to share it on Facebook or any other social media and tell your friends. You can also go to audibletrial.com/KYHistoryPod and get a free book of your choice. And finally, you can visit patreon.com/KYHistoryPod if you want extra content from us. If you're already a patron, thank you for your support. It means so much to us. All the links I've mentioned are in the description of the podcast, so go check them out. Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoy this episode. And remember, if it's not about Kentucky, it ain't worth a hill of beans. Today's episode is brought to you by Restaurant.com. With Restaurant.com, you can save at thousands of restaurants across the country with just a few clicks. Their dining deals range from $5 to $100, never expire, and cost you a fraction of the face value. Dinner has never been easier with Restaurant.com. Used for dine-in, takeout, or delivery. Restaurant.com is offering our listeners 50% off their next purchase by going to www.restaurant.com/podcast. That's www.restaurant.com/podcast for 50% off your next purchase. Restaurant.com, the best deal every meal. Welcome back, everyone, to the Kentucky History Podcast, The Land Between the Meadows. I'm sitting here with Mr. Pope on a nice Tuesday.
Yeah.
Tuesday.
We were thinking it was Saturday.
And
I could have swore it was Monday.
Yeah, and we got a good little discussion ready, prepared. We're semi-prepared.
You semi-prepared. Do you really feel like different days of the week have different feelings? I mean, can you tell a Monday from a Tuesday if no one told you?
Probably not. If I was, if it was like the summer, probably
you were
not.
drunk or something, drinking.
But I know. Everyone talks about the Mondays. You got the Mondays. Not so much.
Not so much.
I'm here, I guess.
They all just run together anymore.
Eventually, they all become a blur.
Wake up and you're an old man.
What was it? Groundhog Day.
We're going to be talking. Yeah, all over again. We're going to be talking today about Harlan County, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And when people think of Kentucky, they oftentimes think of Harlan County because it seems to be in the news so much. Yes. It's one of those counties that that
has a reputation.
Has a reputation. It really does, and probably rightly so. And I guess we're going to be talking about some of that reputation and some of the feelings that people have. I guess we're going to start maybe around the Civil War time.
Yeah, throughout the years, really.
It's always been crazy, and it's probably still crazy today to a certain extent. But back in the old days, oh my gosh. I was trying to think while I was riding over here through the woods and over the creeks and rivers to get to Crab Orchard today. Just what the people were like back then. If you ran into a bunch of them. Yeah. And I'm sorry, Harlan County people, but I'd say, people generally were pretty rough, but man, in Harlan County, you talk about hollow-eyed, crazy people, another level. If you can just imagine that, it's like the devil's children, no family, It was just rough, it was isolated, and at the time of the Civil War, there were, people, the Confederacy was coming over from Tennessee and different places, and they were foraging because they didn't have any food supplies, and what that meant was foraging. It meant just robbing. It meant just going from house to house and just taking the cows and the chickens and the pigs and the horses and country hams. And anybody got in your way, just shoot them for the heck of it,
It is a pretty interesting term that foraging is given to, in the military.
Yes.
Whenever you're raiding someplace. When it's really just stealing.
It's legal robbery.
Yeah.
It's not even legal. But, all this stuff, and they didn't have much to start with. We've talked about it's mainly mountainous, coal and trees and timber. Mm-hmm. But, what food they could eke out there, was just stripped from them. So when you get into 1863 and 4 and 1865, the area was pretty much depleted. And there was no real guard or army that came up. It was just home guards, which at best were just a bunch of neighbors that got together with their guns and rifles and decided what law was going to be.
Yeah,
county militia. County militia. If you can imagine the Harlan County militia. In the 1890s, back when the Klan was raging and Harlan County was a hotbed for the Klan, there were so many murders in Kentucky, per capita highest in the United States, and a lot of it was coming from Harlan County. And remember, I've said before, they asked the governor then, why there were so many murders and killings in Kentucky. And he said, I reckon there's a lot of people in Kentucky that need killing, So that was his response, for the New York Times that was published. But Eastern Kentucky in general, and Harlan County in particular, was strong Unionist. There were only 19 slaves in Harlan County. Yeah. In the whole county. And Harlan County back then included some of the neighboring counties. It was wider, went all the way to Cumberland Gap. So Cumberland Gap was a strategic entrance into the state. We talked about the Ohio River and Cumberland Gap, and it still was at the time of the Civil War. And there were some real characters there. There was a guy by the name of Tom Crupper who started off as a private in the Southern Army, and he was kind of a spy, and he and some of his boys came over into Harlan County, and he wound up marrying into, I believe it was the Metcalf family while he was there, and he had fallen out, and he shot some people up. I think he shot his in-laws, killed all of his in-laws, his cousins, his nephews. He killed them all. Took the cow. He wasn't really family oriented. They got that famous place there in Harlan County called Rebel Rock, and a bunch of Union home guards caught him chased him up at spine, that ridge of Pine Mountain, and he either jumped off or they threw him off into the rocks, and his bones are still there. They just threw a bunch of rocks over on top of him. He's still there. There might be some kind of a marker or something for him, but he joined the Rebel Army and then joined the Union Army, and he was just a real character going back and deserters, and Crupper was supposed to go before a firing squad, and he was interned up in Ohio in a prison, and then he swore they'd never fight again, and they released him, and then he joined the Army again. He was charged with murder and was going to be hung, and he came back and shot a bunch of more people, and finally chased him up a rock or something.
How often would you say
he jumped off?
How often would you say, soldiers were defecting, going back and forth, and during the Civil War?
There was some of that, but see, what some of them did is that they would sign up. You could get a bounty. If you were drafted and you had money, you could hire somebody to take your place. You give them like $500,
really?
And they would sign up, and that was an honorable thing to do, and they would fight for you. They would take your spot, so you wouldn't be a deserter or anything. I had a great uncle in New York State that was drafted, and he hired a guy to fight for him, and the guy was killed. He gave him $500.
Wow.
And the guy fought for him, very honorable, was killed. So
worked out great for your uncle.
Yeah, it worked out great. That's why I'm here, somehow through because of that deal. But you and your school go to Pine Mountain Settlement School every year. We did that for 20 years, 25 years or something. And Adrian Metcalf, who was the in-law of this Crupper guy, this rebel, the cabin at Pine Mountain Settlement School, I think they call it the Critchfield or the Crupper cabin. Adrian Metcalf's cabin is a Pine Mountain Settlement School was at the center of this. He was a unionist, and he had to deal with this crupper and so forth up there. After the Civil War, there was kind of a lot of craziness stuff that went on. The Klan became very strong. Again, you think of the Klan in the South, but you're talking about Harlan County being strongly unionist.
Yeah.
But they were anti-Catholic and anti-Semitic. Not that I imagine there were very many Jewish people around there.
No.
And they were anti-immigrants up in Appalachia. We don't want no new people coming in here. And it grew really large. And there were some kind of political elites that put Harlan County in the center, according to the newspaper, were made up of nice people, quote unquote, including unionized coal miners and preachers. And, it's so, you've got to just understand that Harlan County is so removed or remote from mainstream America that, this type of stuff, was easy to understand, became commonplace. Many of the Ku Klux Klanners in the 1890s were made up of preachers, and they remembered coal miner Tillman Cattle that said that preachers were all for the Klan. And they were, a lot of the preachers he laments were fooled by the Klan. They were against anything that was ungodly, quote unquote, and that the Klan was going to help straighten things out. And the biggest thing that they did was somebody got drunk and beat their wife up, then the Klan would go in and give them a beating and tell them not to bother her anymore. That was part of the Klan's activity. They were, they were against black people. They were against lewd women, supposedly. And, they hung women and burned them at the stake.
Hey.
That's some of the Klan's activities. Some of these ministers' works up there, men of God. And they kept a lot of laws in coal camp towns. It was the Klan that ruled the coal camps then. But they weren't, ruled upon doing bad things. Eastern Kentucky had historically been, a holdout for Klan activity in the 19th century. And, in nearby Breathitt counties, Klan made up the Democratic voting of the Confederate veterans. They were real powerful there. And in Letcher and Pike County was led by John and Noah Reynolds and their cousin Morgan Tillman Reynolds. And some of them served in the Confederate Army. One of the things that I found kind of interesting was the murder of Letcher County Sheriff in 1900, Jemina Osborne Hall, and her son in 1901. They were led to arrest and expulsion of youthful reformers from Harlan County. They were called youthful reformers. Yeah, I think that's kind of funny. And they said that, one of the things they did was, in their outreach, was Bad John was a sheriff up there, and they whipped one of his lewd women. And he damn near killed every one of the Klansmen because of it. He was a polygamist. He had more than one wife. And he was
polygamist.
Polygamist. He was a polygamist. He was a polygamist. And he had lots of women, and one of them beat up one of his women, said she was a lewd woman, and he went off and nearly killed him. And they put a chain around his neck and threw him off a cliff. But, that's just normal. That was some of them good boys, that hardly do anything wrong. And then, the crackdown on the Ku Klux Klan was led by, and this gets me, a Deputy Sheriff, Devil John Wright. He was a Democrat, and he was a polygamist. A brothel punter. He was a moonshiner, and he was a circus performer, if you can believe that. And he was also known as a serial killer in his own right.
Wow.
And he's the sheriff. Of Harlan County. Now, there you go. And he served in both armies. He served as a Unionist and a Confederate and a rebel during the Civil War. So and he's the sheriff.
Yeah.
He's the high sheriff. He made a small fortune by repeatedly joining and deserting the Union Army as a paid substitute for wealthier drafted men, like we talked about earlier.
He's making a living.
Right. But he was a polygamist. He was a Democrat. He was a brothel punter. He was a moonshiner. What's a brothel punter?
I don't know exactly. A brothel
punter.
Brothel punter.
I guess he kicked him off like he operated him.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'd say he did. I'd say he operated them.
Multiple ones?
Multiple ones. Yeah, he had them all over. And every town had one. And he was in charge of them.
Let us know.
He's a circus performer. Yeah, let us know if you know what a brothel punter is. And he was a serial killer in his own right. And he's the sheriff.
Wow.
Served in
cracked down on the KKK.
He cracked down on the KKK. But he was one of the good old boys. One of the youthful reformers. Kind of like the YMCA. Yeah. So that leads us up into more modern times and the memory of that. And they call it Rebel Rock up there where they threw that crupper off. And they didn't even bury him. They just left him there. They ever threw him off or he jumped to his death. So, that's Harlan County.
So
Legends.
That does lead us up to where we are.
Youthful reformers.
Yeah, where we're gonna kind of dive in a little deeper because since we talked about Eastern Kentucky, I don't know.
Have you got family up there?
Not in Harlan County, no.
See, I do.
Oh yeah,
very distantly.
Oh.
Yeah, we came over the mountains from. My family split in the Squatchy Valley, and about a half of them moved over and went into coal and timber. There's a lot of coal up there.
Yeah.
And the other half stayed. My family, my side of the Popes.
Yeah.
They're all Popes. They stayed down in Tennessee. So I'm a Pope Tennessee versus a Harlan County Pope.
Oh, gotcha.
But they are related.
There you go.
I met a James Pope who's a doctor, an optometrist in Lexington. He's still operating there, I think. And we talked about our family history. And he was a Harlan Pope. And I said, I'm a Tennessee Pope, And they said, we're kin.
Words.
That's right. Give me half off on the glasses.
Yeah. But when you're looking at Harlan County, there is a lot of history and a lot of violent history to say that. And when you think about Kentucky, a lot of people probably think of Harlan County.
Yes, they do.
Before anything else. At least if you're outside Kentucky. Obviously, if you're inside Kentucky, there's plenty to think about.
Yeah, or not to think about, whichever the case may be.
So we're kind of building up to the Harlan, Coal Wars in Harlan County, the strikes. I mean, there's multiple strikes to talk about, but mainly, I wouldn't say the first one because it's not the first one. The first big one, which would be the Battle of Everett's and all this clash of Union versus versus the co-operators and all this kind of stuff that goes on. Yeah.
Now, I don't mean to interrupt you, but just I was trying to get this idea of what these people look like. Back during this time.
Yeah.
They didn't even have shoes to wear.
Yeah.
These soldiers. And the minister of the church is the King Dragon for the Klan.
What's it? Grand Wizard.
Grand Wizard. Yeah. He's a Grand Wizard. He's the minister of your church.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty crazy.
I mean, just
really
think
crazy.
about going to church up there. Being a devout something. You better not be a Catholic because they'll hang you.
But
or Jew.
old preacher's got our back.
But
He's
preacher's
Grand
got
Wizard.
our back. He's Grand Wizard. Yeah. I mean, just think about that. Living in a culture like that.
Yeah.
Of violence and of and that's the church.
Yeah. I mean, that's the law, man.
That's the law.
How they kept things.
That's how they roll, man. And then be an outsider and come.
Yeah.
Nah. Well, that's down the street there with a cold beer in your hand or something,
So I found this article. This is a pretty good article, and it kind of falls in tone with that. But this is from the Evening Star from Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, August 25th, 1931. And I'm going to read it, and bear with me. The good parts at the end, as typically things intend to be. But it sets up the stage, and mainly what we'll get into today is just kind of what set up the stage for all these strikes and all these violent events. But the venue change hit in Harlan trials. Committee complains of increased costs of defending Kentucky miners. Harlan, Kentucky, August 25th. 36 more indictments were returned in the Harlan coal fields cases here today, including one charging criminal syndicalism. Syndicalism.
Yeah.
Against Miss Jessie London Wakefield, former University of Washington co-ed in Harlan County, August 25th. All murder and other cases arising from coal field disturbances will be tried in some county other than Harlan. I wonder why.
Yeah, I wonder.
Despite protests of defense counsel that the venue change will cause additional expenses to defendants. Circuit Judge D.C. Jones yesterday ordered venue changes in 18 murder cases resulting from a quadruple killing at Everett's last May, and said he would issue a similar order today concerning 15 other charged with murder and Wednesday would order changes of venue in numerous causes of criminal syndicalism and banding and
prostitution.
Confederating. Bail for each murder defendant was set at $15,000.
That's high up there.
Now, when Commonwealth attorneys W.A. Brock.
That's a Harlan County name. The Critchfields, the Brocks, Metcalfs, Popes.
And defense counsel were unable to agree on sites for the transfer trials. Judge Jones and he would settle that also by court order. Last week, he ordered William B. Burnett, charged with slaying Deputy Sheriff Jess Pace, tried at Mount Sterling, Montgomery County, 150 miles from Harlan. The date for the trial was set for November 5th. The defense objection to the cost of the transfer trials was supported by Herbert Mailer, Secretary of General Defense Committee, who said at Chicago the committee's fund for defense, this is an old paper, of the miners would be hit hard if we have to transport and maintain witnesses at great distances from Harlan. Miss Harvey O'Connor, 27, Winnipeg, Illinois, was in Frankfort yesterday to ask Governor Flem D. Sampson if she would be shot at if she came to Harlan to report the situation for the Federate Press. The governor told her she would not be interfered with if she was law-abiding while in Harlan. She will replace Boris Israel, who was shot in the leg last week after 3 men told him to leave town.
Golly.
So,
will I be shot, Governor? Probably
no, not if you abide the law.
But the last one was ever shot.
The last guy there was shot. So, that sets up the stage. Or that's the precursor. Yeah. That's what happened in the Battle of Everett and all this. I mean, mayhem. And it was really.
I think I told you, and I hope my son's not listening to this, but for his Christmas present, I bought at the 127 yard sale a original photograph of the Cincinnati Reds playing up there.
Yeah.
And the coal miners had been riding, and the team picture has all the Cincinnati Reds baseball players in their uniforms, and they all have a pistol on their hip because they were afraid that they'd come over from Harlan County and there'd be trouble.
Shoot them if they lost.
They all played a game up there, and they all carried guns.
Wow, that is pretty.
And that was in the 1800s.
That's wild. That is.
That's wild.
You need to take.
Yeah.
Well, once you give him the present, get a picture of it.
Yeah. It's wild, man.
Yeah. So a few things that are big players here is the Battle of Everett. That's kind of when things really got messy. John Henry or J.H. Blair, that was the sheriff during all this, or the first sheriff during all this. And then Florence Reese is the well-known writer of Which Side Are You On? Big things that happen with the coal strikes and so forth, especially we're around the time of like 1929, 1930, is the Great Depression had plenty of influence on it. Coal pricing has a lot of influence as well. Now, when you're looking at these towns, a lot of these towns sometimes were just created for the coal companies. The coal companies would come in and create it. And if you go into Harlan, some places like Chevrolet is a town, and I don't know. I don't know for sure if Chevrolet is named after the car company or if this was something else.
It's named after it.
Yeah. If you go to it, it's kind of a completely gutted town. Like you can drive. There's some new houses there, but like it's really eerie because
It's gutted today.
Yeah. There's only like
still gutted
fireplaces. There's fireplaces.
Right.
That's all that's left.
Down.
Everything else is gone. But Lynch, the town of Lynch,
some of those nice people up there,
which was built by the U.S. Coal and Coke.
Take the name Lynch.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was saying. I was like, why did they pick that name?
I'm sure.
But anyway,
that's what they did.
It still is a pretty the old buildings that were built by the Coke company are still there. But anyway, that's just if you're ever in Harlan, check those places out. The Katina Corporation in 1930 owned 38,000 acres in Harlan, which I mean is a lot of acres for a company to own. Still, if you look at the actual size,
a lot of coal up there.
It is. Oh yeah,
still is.
And that's the next thing I was going to say. The railroad had a lot to do with things of connecting. Obviously, we've talked about it many times. But in 1910, Harlan County mined 17,860 tons of coal, which is quite a bit. That's worth about $21,000 then. In 1929, though, almost 20 years later, there was 59 mines opened, and they mined 14,500,000 tons of coal,
Wow.
which would be valued like 25.5 million, which is massive.
That's with the pickaxe.
And now this made Harlan, at this time, was one of the wealthiest counties in Kentucky.
Yeah.
With that being said, though, who was getting that wealth? We've talked about that more before. I mean, it's the workers were very,
It was a stratified society, wasn't it? With the wealthy on top and everybody else poor.
We mentioned a little bit, the local population was not big enough to even sustain these massive scale mines, so they had to recruit people to come in, and any kind of typical recruiting that you may think they would offer, people from the South, people from Europe, was like, look at come to our schools. Our schools are better than than the public schools. You can come live in Lynch, and we'll get you have a house. You'll be paid for. You'll live better. You'll work you to death, but but you'll be there. The population in Harlan tripled from 10,000 to 31,000 in the first decade, as in from 1910 to 1920. Now, the next decade, it doubled to 64,000.
Golly.
The population was pretty much 90% white.
It's jobs and money.
Yeah, 9% black, 1% foreign. Now, all the people that were, like most of the black or the foreign people lived in Lynch. The rest of them lived at, the rest of the population.
Justifiable.
Yeah. The population now, though, is like 24,000. So, I mean, that's like almost half or more than half have left. Which, as coal went down.
If you were black and you lived in Lynch, you were screwed.
You probably did not want to.
They hung, the Klan hung black people.
Oh, yeah.
The minister.
The minister.
Yeah, led the church, the congregation.
Go get them.
Yeah, serial killer.
The employees went from 169 mines to 11,000.
The minister owned the brothels. He owned the Klan. He was like the wizard, grand wizard.
So 3 factors kind of contributed to this expansion. High quality coal, which
evangelical.
cheap high quality coal, I should say. It's not really high quality. I mean, coal's not really high quality, but no unions.
Probably said it was.
Yeah, no unions, so that meant low wages, better freight, freight rate to be exact, I guess. But the big investors were United States Steel Corporation, Ford Motor Company, and Peabody Coal Corporation. These were the main players. Yeah. But the miners, this was a big push.
I used to buy coal out of eastern Kentucky and feed it to hogs.
Really?
Yeah, they love it. And I've heard old people say that it worms them.
Really?
So I'd buy a 50-pound burlap bag of coal, go and put it in my trunk, and go feed it to my hog. They'd eat it, boy, you pour it out, and they just eat it like it was corn.
Wow.
Just crack it.
That's it?
Yeah. They love it, but they say it ruins the chitlins. It does. If you feed hogs coal, it ruins the chitlins.
Wow. That's Well, I've never done that. So
I did it for years.
They say hogs.
I made my living. Well, they like coal.
Yeah.
I made my living off of it.
Off hogs or?
Off hogs.
Hogs, yeah. Okay.
And coal.
So the United Mine Workers. Sidetrack.
Yeah.
They didn't really have a presence at all.
Praise God for the miners.
Feed them hogs.
Feed them hogs.
But they did have in the northern mines. So a miner in Harlan would be making 42% less than a miner in Illinois.
Yeah, of course.
35% less than a miner in Indiana. 24% less than a miner in Ohio. And 5% less than the miner in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So right. big. Not the lack of union was a big problem. Yep. But their low cost, their low labor costs, because they're going to pay them.
UAW, buddy.
And they paid their employees so cheap, they were able to counter off the freight cost, so that they made massive massive profits. So the average miner made about $578 a year to $1,235 a year.
If you lived up there wasn't a whole lot of choices for employment.
No, there wasn't.
There wasn't. I mean, you either did coal or you died. I mean, everybody worked coal.
And
it wasn't like it is today. You couldn't travel. There weren't any roads.
Their wives or anything like that. They
couldn't do nothing.
Home.
Yeah, if you're female, you just Stayed home, made biscuits, man.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm not sure. This was the
Made biscuits,
the library,
popped out kids,
the nursing program. That stuff
Seriously.
was just that was it. You really didn't have any options. I mean, maybe you're the sheriff. That'd been about it. So in 1917, the mines the mines tried to organize a little, or the unions tried to organize a little bit. In World War I, and the demand for coal, Harry Garfield, the National Field Administrator, summoned up Harlan operators and the union to D.C., all these people, to say, hey, we need get these higher wages, shorter days, so we can get more coal for the war effort.
Yeah.
But both sides pretty much said, hey, as soon as this war is over, we're breaking this agreement.
Right.
And that's what happened. On November 1st, 1919, on December 12th, I think, sorry. So anyway, they broke it up. And it's really crazy when you think about that. 60 miners went on strike. 39 miners went on strike and shut down 60% of the coal that was coming out of Harlan. And the steel company, Wisconsin Steel, and the Coal and Coke Corporation, they still were able to operate, but they pretty much did not. They shut it down just because they strike. Which, of course, it didn't last that long. The operators didn't recognize the contract. They pretty much ran out the miners, the union people. They would evict them if they joined the union. And I mean, if you're, like you said, if you're in Lynch, Kentucky, and you're working at so and so mine, but you join the union, they kick you out. You got to leave. There's nothing else for you to do. The operators pretty much ignored all the union demands, and they would push them out if they, without any kind of standing ground. A small agreement was made, and it didn't recognize the miners or the union, but it did, I guess, get them back to work. Ended the strike. The union, there was a small union in the Black Mountain Coal Corporation, but it didn't last. Like Harlan, there's a big. What could you say? Call it a. There was an organization against the miners, which the coal operators. There was a reason behind all of that, and the sheriff, of course, is in on the, or is all about it as well. You got, corruption, I guess, would be.
One way to.
Yeah. So, and
I'm talking about Cumberland, Kentucky. That's in Harlan County.
Yeah.
I like Cumberland today. I think it's a nice town. It's one of the bright spots.
So
it's beautiful too. I mean, Harlan County is just
really nice.
Unbelievable. Pine Mountain goes through there.
Hiking up there, and like we were talking about the settlement school. It's
Pine Mountain Settlement School.
Anybody should. Going up there just to relax.
Phew, man.
That's one thing I really missed last year, not being able to go.
We can't relax down here in Lincoln County. They won't let us.
Peabody Coal Corporation, they abrogated a union contract and destroyed the 900 member local union in 1924. Again in September. 42 union members were discharged, evicted, blacklisted. If you're blacklisted, that means other mining companies won't even hire you.
Right.
So they did that.
Well, they went to arms though.
Well, they are, and that's what we're building up. So these
I've had it. That's
these coal operations, they started. They bring out their private mine guards.
Yes, I know.
Surround the place. Any kind of talk of union, buddy, you're out of there. And not just,
they beat you up.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I kind of set up all this stuff. Many of the unions
break your legs and your arms.
Union members that had fled the county, that anybody that had
lift a few of your teeth,
pull your last tooth.
Pull your last tooth.
So many
knock that water back out of your mouth.
So a lot of the people that joined in mines or tried to start mines, they left Harlan County, and pretty much it became this unionless place.
Yeah.
But however, there's a few that did remain, and these few that settled in the town of Everett and kept their UMA or UMW local 5355 membership. A small group that was left of all these union workers. Little to the unknown person, these people would be the ones that would be at the center of the conflict. In
This
1931.
weekend, I sat up next to this guy that traded guns and knives up at Preston, Kentucky, which is kind of like the court day at Mount Sterling. And I was set up selling guns, too, up there. And he and I talked all day. I was up there for 4 days. And he was a former United Mine worker and worked in the coal mines, was his first job.
Yeah.
And he said, I told my grandchildren, he said, they say that working won't hurt you. He said, it does hurt you. He said, I told my grandchildren grow up and do nothing. He said, I've had knee replacement, hip replacement, shoulder replacement, and he said, I'm still in pain from when I worked in the mines.
Yeah.
He said, I'm an old man now. He said, but I'm tore all to pieces. The mines killed me.
Wow.
And he said, I've told my grandchildren, don't ever work hard.
Well,
he said, it ain't worth it because when you get old, you'll just be all crippled up. And he said, they can't replace enough parts on you for you to operate right.
Yeah.
That's what he was telling me.
Well, I can see it. I mean, working in a mine, well, I mean,
He said, it's just horrible.
16 hours a day.
He said, it just screws you up for life when you get old.
Yeah.
He said, you ain't right. He said,
No,
you weren't
I'd
right
say so.
before and wasn't right after.
It's lose-lose.
It's a lose-lose situation all the way around. That's
Yeah.
what he said. He was up West Virginia side, just over the line.
Which, I mean, a lot of the mine, the Battle of Blair Mountain and those kind of things, that was in West Virginia.
Yeah,
Those things that really
Yeah.
sparked things off
Yeah.
a lot. And, like that was around 1901.
Yeah.
And so, but then like the stuff in Harlan, like I said, the Union had kind of been pushed out, but there was a group of guys that were there left in Everett that they would end up being like the epicenter of all the bloody Harlan and kind of the ones that start off the strike and actually have a notable strike and like, scabs come in and things get really, really rough and violent. But I won't save that. We'll save that and get into that on another episode. Mainly wanted to get set up like the background of Harlan with this episode. And I mean, it's a unique place. We'll get into J.H. Blair and some of his doings and all that stuff.
A bunch of us guys a long time ago used to come down to Rockcastle County to a Friday or Saturday night auction barn, like an old barn down there. And the man's name was Everwright. And
Everwright.
Everwright. And we'd say, we're going to Everwright's auction. Boy, it's a trip. It was a trip.
Well, I'd say so. You go in Rockcastle.
Yeah, it was a trip, man. The light bulbs were hanging low. 40-watt bulbs.
Yeah. So that's all I got for now.
That's good, man. That was good. It's interesting.
We'll get more into the...
Yeah. We've hit around on the coal quite a bit. And we talked about Mayo and all that.
Yeah. Well, it all
rise and fall. And the, whether that's good or bad. There's associations with it. Is it good that people brought in industry and coal when they wasn't there before? Did they not do us a favor?
Yeah.
I think they probably didn't do us a favor. I think they just got rich off the people and polluted the area and destroyed the land, the beauty of it, and got out. And a lot of it was owned in New York and everywhere else. So I'm not a big proponent of the strip mining and the morons that run the corporations and just rape people.
Yeah, and I mean I think they took advantage of.
They take advantage of these people.
Situation. I mean,
granted, there's nothing going on up there, or there wasn't, and it increased land values and so forth. But still,
but think that then to now what's left?
Look what you got.
Look what
you got. Morons.
Yeah,
big time.
So that's that.
That's it, man.
Stick
a fork in it. Round third and head for
Harlan. Yeah, there you go. So if you want to connect to us, or if you want to tell us what a brothel punter is,
brothel punter.
I don't know what
that was it. We were having trouble pronouncing words today. Being educators.
Yeah, let us
on the foothills of the Appalachians.
Let us know.
What's a brothel punter?
And we'll talk more. Maybe next time. Next time we'll talk get into the battle.
Let's talk about brothel punters.
We may get into something else, but many prospects on the horizon of things to talk about. So if you want to connect to us on Facebook or Twitter at KY History Pod. We also have an Instagram, but I have no clue what I'm doing with it or how to operate it. So good luck with that.
Yeah.
All right. If there's anything else, we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.